Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney, and on today's show, we're going to be taking our first look at the remote components of NewTek's NDI Bridge. And we're really excited about this. This has been a long time coming, and I know this is actually something that a lot of you as well have been waiting for. So we're going to do a fairly deep dive into it today. But before we get there, I'd please like to invite everyone to participate if you'd like. If you have any questions, any comments, please just put them in the comment section below through whichever mechanism you're viewing the show from. If you'd like to actually join us here on the show, we have a connection link that you can use to get to us, and somebody from the studio will bring you on air with us. So we'd really encourage any type of questions or comments that you may have. And so I think we're all set to dive in. So let's get started. Let's first start by taking a look at the diagram of what we're going to be using to do all the interconnections to demonstrate NDI Bridge. So over here, we're going to be connecting with two remote sites. The first one is going to be hosted at AWS, and so that we have set up and running. The second is coming from the studio of a friend of mine, and he's going to be just sending us a feed of his green screen, so nothing particularly dialed in, but just to demonstrate the fact that as a protocol, as a mechanism inside of NDI, you now have the ability not just to connect peer-to-peer with NDI, but to actually create really a cluster where everybody that's within this cluster can share their NDI feeds with everyone else. So it's really a very powerful mechanism for what we're going to be demonstrating here. So before I actually get into how this would be configured, let me just check the comments because I want to turn around and make sure we say hello to everyone. So we have Rudy here. Rudy, yes. The hour changes are going to be hitting all of us here, so that's something I know we're all in the midst of trying to figure out who's on what time zone. But welcome, great to have you here. So we have American Newscape. America Newscape, thank you for joining us again. It's great to see you here each week. We also have Tim Bryan from Louisville, Kentucky. So, Tim, thank you for joining us here. Great to see you. And we also have Samuel Nordvik. So, Samuel, thank you for joining us. Definitely appreciate it. All right, so let's get into it. The great thing about NDI Bridge is that it is incredibly simple to set up. And there are really just the two pieces to it that we have to take a look at. So the first one is what you set up for the host. So in that diagram I showed, the host system is running here. So that's my system right here in front of me on the desk. And what you need to do for that is you need to turn around and decide what you want to share as the host with everybody that will connect with you, what NDI sources. And you do that through NDI Access Manager and setting up groups and assigning feeds to groups and then telling NDI Bridge which groups you want to share out with the rest of the people that will be joining you across Bridge. Then you specify a bridge name, and it should probably be something that gives you some clue as to where that remote site is and what their role is in your overall production, so it's easy to find and know where a source is coming from. You then have your public IP address, which is how everybody that's remote is going to connect to you, and you also have a port. And so ports are always a tricky thing when it comes to working sort of with firewalls and with other routers that have a separate boundary between the internet and your internal network. So what the port is going to do is it's going to let you advertise to the outside world not just your general IP address, which is somebody connected to your router wouldn't really know what to do, but when you connect with an IP address and a port, you can instruct the router to route that message, any message connecting to that IP and port number, to a specific IP and port number within your infrastructure. And so what you are doing here is you are picking the port number that you're going to be using to have somebody connect with you. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same as the one advertised externally, but that will make your life a lot simpler and save the engineering head scratching that will go on when you're trying to figure out how to get everything working. But so this is the only tricky piece to using NDI Bridge. You need on the host site to do a port forward so that anybody that connects will be able to route to the correct box hosting bridge. And then the last piece is a security piece where it will generate a key. I believe you can just type your own in as well, but you generate a key that is used almost like a password. It's an encryption key. So anything that's sent to you will, for somebody to make that connection, it will need to leverage that encryption key when they join. That's it. You fill out that information and click start, and then the host is running. So it's a very, very straightforward mechanism for doing that. The other piece, though, that we've talked about when we is that you're sharing as well. So what I'd like to do very quickly is jump over to my second screen and just show you one of the things you need to be aware of with the feeds that you are going to share. So here on the other screen, there is something called encoder settings. And this is our running version of NDI Bridge here. And when you set up encoder settings, you have to come back and say, what encoding mechanisms do I want to use? So do I want to use full NDI? Do I want to use NDI HX? Do I want to use what codec for the encoding? Do I want to use H.264? Do I want to use HEVC? And then you also have a quality setting. And this is really going to show, just specify how much bandwidth you want to leverage for those feeds that you're sharing. So per feed, what would you be sending? So we have this set really low because we're doing a live stream right now. So we didn't want to be sending out camera feeds competing with our path to the internet for our live stream. But this would let you set it up for any type of bandwidth that you wanted to here. And you can actually dial it in to specific numbers as well. So that's the other piece. So everybody that shares feeds, they're definitely going to need to set the bandwidth appropriate for the amount of bandwidth they will be uploading to you. And the other piece to keep in mind, unless you have massive pipes, you're going to want to force everything to NDI HX and do a transcode, because a 1080 NDI feed is going to be over 100 meg. So unless you have that type of multi-100 meg uplink that's consistent and reliable, you're definitely going to want to transcode everything into NDI HX. So something else to keep in mind here. So let me switch back to the remote piece of the settings, which we were talking about before on the other screen. So for the remote guest, they will join this hosted session that you've started. So we have two at AWS and at my friend's remote studio. So for each of them, they'll do the same thing, use Access Manager to define which sources they want to share with us. And then they'll name their computer. So when I see any sources, I'll know it comes from them. And they'll type in my IP address and the port that they should be coming across. Two very, very basic things here that, again, we've already set this up. So you're just sharing that information. And they'll have to paste in the same encryption key that was set up when you started the host. and then you'll just click join. So very simple. The other thing is when you want to share the information for what a remote guest will need to do, if you notice on the hosting page to the left here, there's a little clipboard icon next to the port. So that clipboard icon basically will grab all the information that the remote guest will need, the IP, the port, and the encryption key, and give you that as a little block of text that you can just route as a text feed or email or however you want to share that. So it's very easy to pass that information around. So that's everything that's involved in the setup. So let's actually start start to dig in a bit more and look at the quality of what we get. So if you, let's just switch over to my vMix screen here, and we can take a look. So here, if you are looking across, this is a local camera that I have coming in. So this camera right over there. Then I have a feed that's coming from AWS. And as you can see, I mean, the quality here is fine. And this is coming from just a remotely hosted computer. And we'll dig into how that looks. I also have, this is the feed from my friend's studio. It's just pointed at a green screen. So the real goal here, this isn't set up specifically for that, but the real goal here is just to show that you can have multiple remote locations connected with your host, and all, in this case, 3 of these sites are sharing NDI feeds. So as you can see, from a quality point of view, this really looks great. So let me actually show you what we have running on AWS. So over here, I have on my other system, I have an RDP into our AWS hosted site. So let's just switch over to the second screen. So what we're running here is we are running NDI Bridge in this AWS instance, and we're running OBS, and we're feeding NDI out over OBS. And this really is the exciting piece here, is that everything that we're doing here with NDI works as if it's local. So what I can do, and this is great, if I open up Studio Monitor, let me see if I can just open a Studio Monitor over here. And I'm going to connect to my remote site using NDI Studio Monitor. So just give me a second here. So what I am doing here, if you see, is this is that same screen we were looking at before, but now you'll notice I have KVM sitting here. So I can go in and click on this, and now everything that I'm doing here is controlling that remote system in AWS. So NDI isn't just streaming the audio and video feeds, it is a full NDI connection. And this is really, really important because as you think about all the things you take for granted with NDI locally, you have all of that, but now extended across the internet. So let me actually just show one more thing here that I'd like to touch on for this. And that is everything that we've set up over here. This is just running the screen share. So basically scan converter. They've changed the name a few times, so I can never remember what, but I think it's just their scan converter app. And that's all you need to do and set it to allow that. But the other thing you can do, let me see if I have a, yeah, so I'll go over here to the NDI launcher and launch Studio Monitor. And now when I launch Studio Monitor here, let's switch over to the other screen here. So when I launch Studio Monitor, I can now see, let's see, we got Bridge over here. So I just want to make sure I've got everything here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to one of the cameras that I have here. Sorry. So I have the bird door camera here. So now I'm here at a remote location, uh, and I have all my PTZ controls. So you can see that there's the latency here between the feed that's coming back, but I can now go to any sort of presets that I have here and move around, and this gives me now not just the feed again, but all of the camera controls that go with this. So again, a second point here to keep in mind that with the full NDI, you get these types of capabilities, which is exactly what we need to do remote productions. Okay, so we actually have a caller. So I believe it's Kane Peterson from NewTek. So Kane, I'm not hearing you right now. So
Oh, can you hear me?
yep, okay,
There you are.
got it.
How you doing?
Very good, Kane. How are you?
I'm good. I was watching a little bit of your thing, and I just happened to have a chance to join in and try out. In fact, this is the first time I've ever used your call-in stuff. So the call-in software you have, the live to air. So
Oh,
trying that as
cool.
well. So very cool.
So yeah, I mean, we were really excited, that this came out. We got sort of that early look a couple of days, and we're really excited about showing this off on the show. So
Yeah, no, it was very cool to see that. I've actually had my hands on this for about a month, in a working version,
yeah,
running through some betas and stuff. And I still remember when I got one of the first connections. I've done some ones with one of my coworkers down in Florida, down in Mexico City, and in fact, some of our guys in Europe and stuff, and just trying these things out. And I mean, we were just like astounded. It's like, I'm controlling your camera. I'm controlling your system. Hey, look, here's your TriCaster. I'm NDI KVMing the interface and driving it remotely. And the more we played with it, the more like this is everything you could want it to be and more.
yeah.
So
I mean, this is a real game changer, on a lot of fronts, and it's the thing that excites us as we start to look at this is the completeness of the NDI implementation. It's not a deprecated NDI for remote connections. It is a full NDI experience, and like even
it is
things like
sending native NDI signals across the internet, right? We're not
right,
converting them to something else and then flipping them back into another format. You are sending NDI across the internet.
yeah, and that means you get all the things like color space. Because one of the other things that we're going to show is that you can chroma key. You can take a signal from a remote
Hmm.
location and do a key on it, and that's great because that gives you the ability to sort of co-locate people in a virtual space that you even know if everybody's coming in from potentially different remote spaces. So doing that type of setup we think
Oh
is
yeah.
pretty exciting.
I've got a few clients I'm very excited to help them get this set up and working. And I think one of the areas that a lot of people haven't even thought of, right? We've talked about how you can send video and audio and keyboard and mouse and PTZ control and tally. And those are
Yep.
all fantastic things, but you can also send commands through it too. Now, obviously it has to be a program supports it, but like I've shown a few of my coworkers and stuff, and they were just kind of like, what? How are you doing that? Where, his TriCaster, I'm pulling his TriCaster into one of my inputs and I'm sending commands to my input, which is making his TriCaster, switch to a different camera source or figure an auto. And they're like, how are you doing that? I'm like, I'm just sending a command to your
Yep.
TriCaster and just right over the thing and it just propagates through. It's very, very cool.
So I mean, we're really big into automation. So that's
Hmm.
something we definitely want to dive into. If there's documentation of that, I'd love to take a look at that because I can
Yeah,
think of
yeah,
a
I can send you
lot of
what a
programmatic
command of it
things
is
for
because
that.
it's, yeah, I mean, all you got to know is just how to format the command, and then it's just macro commands that go in there. So anything you can do as a macro, you could send through as a system command.
So I mean, that's actually the trifecta there. You so now have everything you could want to do remotely available to you, and so
Yeah.
that is pretty impressive. So I know it's I because it's funny. I've talked to some of the folks at NewTek, And now that NDI is sort of a separate group, there's you don't necessarily get to see everything during the sort of birthing of a new technology, which is exciting in its own way, where you see something that comes in from something that barely works as a prototype to something that's out there running full production. So
Hmm.
I know that that's different here, but I think it's exciting that NDI now has a full organization focused just on that, because this
Oh
type of
yeah, no, I
capability
think
is
that's a good thing, and I talk to those guys quite a bit, so it's
yeah.
they might be separate, but they're still together too.
so so no, so I really appreciate you calling in. Is there anything else specific you wanted to talk about? Because
No, I just saw your thing. I thought, hey, let me just pop in there, and the what I saw, well, you're doing a really good job, and it's I know I've seen a lot of people on Facebook playing with it and asking questions and stuff, and it's exciting, and I've been waiting for it to be out so I could say more about it because I know people have been asking, and
yeah.
I knew it was coming soon, but I didn't have an exact date. I just knew, okay, we're getting close. We're getting close. Everything's working the way it's supposed to. So it's nice to actually see it out there and um, in
Well,
people's hands, starting to use it.
I mean, for everybody that was impatient, it is much better to get something that's really working,
Oh,
and
believe me, you
otherwise,
didn't want the version from before, because I mean, so I had a version that had it working right before, when NDI 5 came out,
yeah,
and it was not working very well at that point. And I didn't know what they were going to do exactly when that happened, but, obviously
yeah.
they just kind of ghosted out the button so you couldn't click start. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the
and
transcoding piece is incredibly useful. I mean, we talked about that in another show where just if you want to do NDI over Wi-Fi, transcoding is a nice
oh,
mechanism to let you.
it's funny because I have a lot of people who just kind of like, what would the local be for? And then we start talking about it, and all of a sudden there are all these reasons to use it come out, right? Because the local mode itself has a lot of valid, very useful use cases. But I understand everybody is looking forward to the host join mode, and that is very cool. And I think, I mean, maybe you mentioned this. I didn't catch your stuff from the beginning, but another thing, just in case people aren't aware, is multiple joins can join a host, and everybody can share between everyone, which is very cool as well. So I've done tests where I was connected to somebody and they were connected to somebody, and all three of us are sharing signals between each other, which is I think not something everybody's expecting to have happen, but
Yeah,
fully works in it.
that's the way we started with that, and we actually have
Yeah.
two remote studios and our studio here, all
Okay.
connected. And we talked about it's more. It's not like a peer to peer now. It's like a cluster. You basically sit there and go.
Hmm.
Everybody that joins the host can define what they want to share out into the community, and then
Yep.
everybody just picks them like regular NDI feeds because, as you
Yeah.
said, that's what they are. So
That's what it is, exactly.
so for everybody that doesn't know, Kane is one of the gurus at NewTek. No, seriously, I mean, Kane Kane does all the cool automation that nobody else thinks you can make a TriCast to do. Kane's the guy who actually makes those things happen, and that he shares a lot with the community. I mean, you have your own website that you host
Yeah,
your videos
I've
on.
actually
So
written. It's kind of funny. For a lot of those, there are apps where I would talk to people, and after like two or three people ask for the same thing, I'm like, I can make an app that does that, and then I find out a bunch of people need it, right? Like that, my little data link timer, right,
yep.
does the countdown clocks. Oh my gosh, I get emails all the time from people saying, I use this in every show or all the time. So it's great to hear helping make people's productions even better.
Yeah, so that's Kane's World, right? Canesworld.com. So,
Yes, because I actually live in Aurora,
so
right?
yep,
Wayne's World.
yep.
And I used to have a friend who would said every time he'd see me, he'd always go, Kane's World, Kane's World. So it just kind of
Yeah.
stuck.
So, well, it may not. It is still party time excellent as well. So
Yes, it
you
is.
actually get the whole thing there. So, so Kane, I really appreciate you calling us here. Thank you very much for popping in on the show.
Oh, great to be on. Thanks.
Okay, take care, Kane. Thanks.
Bye bye.
All right, so that was a happy surprise. I'm really glad Kane took the time to pop in. So let me actually jump back to all the comments because we've had a lot of things going on here since. So let me see. So we have Bruce Richardson. Uh, hello from Canada. Hey, Bruce, how are you? So I've been following everything you've been doing with your new castle-like venue. So definitely excited to see where that all turns out. Definitely an interesting project you have going on there. So we have JP Node from Cape Town. JP, thank you for joining us again. We have David from Costa Rica. David, thank you. Good to have you here. So let's see. So David actually has a question. He says, I need to connect two cameras to a vMix system and send that signal to my studio from 4 different countries. I use SRT. Can I do that by NDI? So the quick answer is yes. This will let you do exactly what you're looking to do. You can set up your main studio, if that's where you want to do the switching with vMix, you could set up NDI Bridge there and then do the hosting there and then take the feeds in from your remote locations via native NDI. So you don't have to do any type of SRT configuration. I mean, SRT is still a possibility, but the real benefit you get with doing it with NDI Bridge is that signal now on your network is native NDI, and you can use it anywhere that you would use NDI. And you could do PTZ control of those cameras, everything else that we've sort of been talking about in the big space. So definitely, I would give this a really strong look to see if this is something that would make sense workflow wise, but it definitely could fill that role, with what's released today here. So let's see. So we have Lee Love. What is the latency for running remote audio? So I haven't measured this exactly, Lee. Uh, I would believe from what I'm seeing in the overall latency that we are probably, uh, you know, 150 milliseconds somewhere in that space. 5 frames or maybe a little more. So it isn't something that is, you know, that real time type of connection, but it's certainly in the conversational space. So if you needed to do signals bidirectionally and use that as a way to route audio to and from a location, that would probably be something that would be sufficiently low latency to have a conversation across that link. So so George Kenny, George, this is great. George, I was down in Virginia last week, and unfortunately, George and I just missed each other. We were trying to get together, but George was busy on a project. So I am still looking forward to getting to meet you in person, George. So thank you for we are really looking forward to ways people will be using NDI Bridge. We think it's an exciting technology on, as a whole package. So even though NewTek calls it a tool, it's got a lot of uses that I think people are going to integrate very quickly into their productions. So so we also have Stephen from Birmingham in the UK. So Stephen, thank you for taking the time to drop in here. Definitely appreciate it. All right, so let's get back. So one of the things I mentioned when I was talking with Kane is that we want to show you the quality of what comes in and how you could actually do something like a chroma key with this. So let me just swing over here and I'll shut off this connection. So now if you look over here on the uh, screen, I have this coming from AWS. I'm going to switch my sources. And now I actually have a chroma key. It's just a chroma key video. that we're playing up on AWS through OBS. And the switching time is really fast. So this is something where when you think about the types of productions you could run, you could switch in one location and it would be natively fluid to somebody. They wouldn't necessarily feel like they were dragging behind the actual production. So that's just a sort of an emotive thing. I haven't done any real latency testing for official benchmarks, but as a operator, it feels very natural to do these types of switches. So with this being set up here as a green screen video, one of the other points I wanted to make was that Chroma information is preserved in this. Like Kane mentioned, this is full NDI. So you can, I believe in NDI HX here, you get 10-bit 422, I believe is what's coming in. So if you have this set up, which we have here, I can go in and just do a Chroma key. And so we'll go into key. Let me see, get this set. So here with the Chroma key set, I actually have this layered on top of a background here. And you can see, I mean, maybe we can take this full screen. You can see that the quality of the key is really solid, and it is something that, you know, from a, let me see if I can switch this over to pull this out here. So this would give us a you know, a quality key that we could use to integrate different people remotely into our, whether it's virtual sets or have somebody, you know, just sort of inject as part of a studio with a background that has a consistent look and feel for everybody, however you'd want to do that. But this gives you now the full capability to do these types of integrated remote productions. So very exciting for that. So I think, you know, everything that we're running here is either, you know, it's coming from a TriCaster at the remote studio from my friend. On AWS, we're running on a sort of a medium to larger size instance there. So, you know, this is just it's a G4DN, you know, 2XL. So it's a, you know, a reasonably priced instance. So some of the things you may want to do, you can do on lower end hardware and be very successful with it. So that's something else just to keep in mind, that, you know, no matter where you want to use this, you will have to scale if you want to take in 10 cameras and do all the encodes. But if you want to take in 1 or 2 or 3 cameras from a remote location, you can probably do that on very economical hardware and make this thing integrate very nicely into your productions. So that really covers everything I wanted to talk about directly. I'm sure there are lots of other questions around this. So what I'd like to do is we'll wrap up the main show here and we'll jump to the post show, and then we can be a little less formal on going over something, and I'll just try to answer whatever questions I can about everything we talked about here. So we will be back next week. Thank you for granting us a week off to let us get some travel and work done that we needed to do on out in the field. So we appreciate everybody's understanding there. And we'll see everybody next week if you can't hang around for the post show. Otherwise, we'll be back in a couple of seconds to follow on from here. Take care, everyone. All right, welcome back, everyone. So, so let's start off. David asked a question. He said, "What about latency if I connect my system at 1080p 2997 with 8 to 12 megabits?" So, I don't think you'd notice a real shift in latency. I think based on the resolution, I don't think it adjusts latency. So I think it has a fixed latency that will cover all of this. And I think that has to do with, you know, when people set up the encodes for what they want to do to send, it probably makes a fixed latency on that. But I think the key in all of this stuff is it isn't real time. It isn't something where you wouldn't notice it if you had two camera feeds side by side. But as I said here, I'm noticing somewhere something that looks like a 5, 6, 7, something in there. So like between 150 and 200 millisecond, that kind of space. Uh, we do want to do more testing. So probably the best way would be to point a camera at a timer and just have it loop up and loop back, and that will give you sort of double the latency that you'll normally be looking at, and you can use that as a benchmark because that's how we set up to do that type of test. And this is definitely something that as I spend more time with it, I'll get into more solid metrics. And I'm sorry I don't have that for everyone today, but this is something that I thought it was more important to come out with this and demonstrate the range of possibilities, and we can dig into some of the technical details sort of underlying that, on a future show. This is definitely a lot more with NDI that we should look forward to covering here. So let me see. So we have Bob Cordell. Just thank Kane, and I am grateful anytime Kane can make the time to jump in and join us here. So thanks, Bob. I appreciate that you recognize that. So we also have UTL Events from India. UTL, thank you for joining us here. I know this is probably getting close to the end of your day, so definitely appreciate you making the time on a Friday or early Saturday morning to tune in here. So, all right. So when we first got this, we probably got this like Tuesday, I think. So it wasn't really. It was just a couple of days before this went out to everyone else. But we were really excited to see what we could sort of pull together and what would actually work. And we were expecting, I mean, to be completely honest, we were expecting that this was going to be, sort of the first pass, a first release. But once we started using it, we found it was incredibly stable for sort of that. This is just fresh off the developer system kind of release, and that bodes really well for this. The other thing that we found that was great is the way everything reconnects. If you so if I reboot my system, start it up, and then just click host again, everybody that was joined to me before I did that reboot automatically reconnects. So as long as any one of these partners is up, like if you're hosting, as long as the other partners in that cluster are all active, if somebody reboots and just starts again, those connections happen seamlessly. And the other thing that I didn't really call out here is that if you are looking at, let me see if I just call up Studio Monitor here. So if we can pop in here, when I come in, so this is, like I said, this is the connection up to our AWS system. But if you look here, this is exactly what you see now. You see this is Bridge that we're connected to. Then we're connected to the AWS Bridge, which is one of the remote guests that joined us. And then we have three feeds. One is the video feed of the capture of the desktop. The other is OBS, and then that's just the remote connection, which is sort of sitting inside of the system, the NDI piece. So this gives us the ability now to connect to a system and then connect to any of the NDI feeds that are available and shared in that system. So to everything we're doing here, that AWS system could be local. I mean, all we know is that we have these NDI feeds. And so anything I want to use that for here, it's native. And that's probably the biggest difference between some of the solutions that bring in sort of SRT natively. They have to do that second translation where you're coming from an encode, SRT as a wrapper, a de-encode, and then some type of translate into NDI. This in the entire pathway is standard NDI, which means all these other capabilities, like Kane was mentioning, things like tally, things like command flow, things around the color space, all of these things remain consistent end to end. So there's going to be no surprises, no translation issues that may come in as you do these. So let's see. So JP is asking, can you touch on if any port forwarding is needed? What about firewalls? So what is needed uh, is you need the ability to port forward on the host environment. So that's the only site, and that's usually the one you have the most control over. So you need to do a port forward there. So that's the one piece. So that's the only port forwarding that you should need to do. None of the other sides will need to do that. And you only need to forward one port, no matter how many connections, which is the other thing. That's something, you typically have to do uh, multiple ports if you were connecting with multiple remote locations using SRT. Even though there is a way to tunnel multiple SRT feeds from a single location, I'm not sure whether that would apply across multiple locations. But that's a definite plus for how this is set up. In terms of protocols, I know it uses reliable UDP. So whatever firewall would be involved would need to allow that type of UDP traffic to pass. And I don't have specific port details if there are any that, on the remote side that may be needed. But as far as I know, it is fairly straightforward to do this, and definitely something I think most environments would feel comfortable, because in joining, those people are initiating the connection. And most firewalls, and I'm not going to say this absolutely, but most firewalls are more lenient with the flow of traffic from connections that were initiated with behind them. So there's sort of somebody's asking for this, so I don't necessarily have to block everything that may be going on. Whereas they'd be much stricter with connections that could be established from outside the firewalls where they want to do more protection. But again, this is something that we've been in places where you think what we wanted to do was simple, but firewalls locked us down. So it is something that will be location by location. But I think it's something that's definitely a optimized with an understanding that these will have to pass through some network infrastructure that is out of people's control, the production crew's control. So this seems right now to be fairly lightweight in demands on firewalls, but we'll have to see. Uh, this is there's still a lot to be learned here as this makes it out. Okay, I think if we don't have any more questions, it probably would make sense to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join today. This is one of those, we get excited about some shows, and this is one of them. We definitely like everything that is coming out with NDI and the direction that NewTek and Viz are taking it. So pretty excited to see what will be next. But so I have Totur. So he said, thanks for all the info. Totur, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us here today. And for everyone, thank you. And we'll see you all next week. Take care. Be safe.